Hello? 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 Could I have everybody's attention for a minute? Oh, that was fast. Thank you. Just wanted to let you know we're starting in a few minutes, but there is free coffee and lots of cold water if you want to go over to our sidebar and enjoy yourselves and have whatever you like. It's all free. Oh, okay. Okay. How are you? Nice to see you. Me too. Nice to see you. Yeah, it's busy. Yeah. It's good. Yes, which is great. Very for the rare occasions. Yes, Decker wants a candidate. Yes. I want to say that. He was provincial. Okay. Oh yeah, you can talk to me about this. Yeah. Do you want me to do it? Okay.
We have the Ottawa Centre and have that way too. But yeah, and everybody came in this way, so that's where they're going to go. But people tend to go elsewhere. Yeah.
Go ahead, whenever you're ready.
Yeah. And where are you sitting? Right there? Okay, perfect. Oh, tell
My name's Kevin. I'm doing the sound.
Oh, great.
And I just wanted to ask, actually, my daughter's doing the sound.
Okay.
And I just wanted to ask, do you feel more...
Well done.
Yeah. Were you going to like cut people off, or did you want to be like, or did it look for your key, or just
60 seconds, do it.
Okay. So
I'll get used to it really quick.
but I won't wait for you to go, okay, you're cut off. We'll just do it on the sound. Okay, perfect.
Oh, yeah, I love that. Oh, I guess I should get rid of this. Honey, on the bus is good. So I got to go. But yeah, I sent you everything you need. Who are you waiting for? Oh, Kevin is right there.
Hello, everybody. Hello. Hey, we're starting pretty much on time, and boy, is it hot. Now, if I was a comedian, I would have a better line after that, but boy, is it hot. We've got the air conditioning on, full blast. We don't actually control the temperature, but all the windows are open, and we've been told that the humidity is going to break tonight sometime. So there's actually apparently a cool breeze already coming in from that window. Okay, so again, welcome to everybody. It's been our tradition in this area of our riding for the last pretty much 12 years for the local community associations to organize all candidates debates for the municipal, provincial, and federal elections. And tonight, the tradition continues. We have 7 co-sponsoring community associations involved: Hampton, Iona, Carlington, Champlain Park, Island Park, McKellar Park, Wellington Village, and Westboro Beach. And we just want to thank all the volunteers for helping to make this event possible tonight. It's no small thing to say we've been working for a number of weeks to make this debate possible with a team of over 15 volunteers just working tonight, not counting our pre-planning staff. Now, on to more important things. We know it's hot. For those of you who don't find the debate stimulating enough, there is coffee available, free coffee over there. For those of you who would like to sleep tonight, there is decaffeinated coffee over there. For those of you who feel your political blood might be boiling tonight, there's loads and loads of ice cold water and free cookies available if there's any left. And by the way, there is a small donation jar over there as well with our friends in McKellar Park at the sidebar, just in case you would like to help us pay for the event tonight. Also, if you drink so much liquid tonight that you need to go to the bathroom, directly behind this room are 2 fully accessible bathrooms. And you may be wondering why there are some yellow cards on some of the seats saying reserved. We thought it was a good idea at the time. They're actually, because we anticipated there might be a large crowd tonight, we wanted to reserve some seating for people who actually have trouble standing. And it is a hot night. I think, unfortunately, all our reserved seating is already gone. So if you do happen to leave early tonight and you see somebody who might want a seat, please point to your seat so they can come over and sit there. And for this next part, if you just bear with me for a second. For those of you who are deaf, sorry, but there is no sign language interpreter here. Sorry, we just weren't able to get somebody for the evening. And lastly, I want to introduce Amanda Pfeffer. Many of you may recognize her, or certainly her voice. Amanda is a longtime CBC News journalist with CBC News Ottawa. Some days you can actually hear Amanda on the radio live doing a news report at noon, and then see her again at 6 o'clock on the evening television broadcast doing another live reporting. And sometimes in between, she actually hosts the noon call-in show, which is province-wide. So Amanda did our last municipal debate a couple years ago. She did our last federal debate a couple years ago. And we got so many good reviews about her that we just had to ask her to come back. So that's it.
Yeah, with the CBC cuts, we also wash the floors. Sometimes we do the interviews. Thank you very much for coming out. I'm always astounded the number of people who want to come and hear this part of the political process. It's really wonderful to see. And if you are standing within an hour and a bit, you'll start to see seats show up, definitely. So if you want to stick that out. There's a number of community associations that have helped put this together. Wonderful community associations, Champlain Park, Hampton, Iona, McKellar Park, Wellington Village, and Westboro Beach, all here, and they will be also participating in asking some questions tonight. And this is your chance to see and hear from the candidates themselves. And all of the people who are here made a commitment to participate in the political process, made a commitment, personal commitment as well. And so I think this is a good chance to just give them all a hand for participating in the process. And because political discussion and debate can be very passionate, the community associations wanted to make clear some rules about how to express your passion, particularly if it boils over into other areas, including intolerant speech or racist speech or just disrespectful speech. So we want to try to keep to avoid that as much as possible. They say this, the community associations: our purpose in having this debate is to allow our community organizations and community members to hear from the candidates and community members so they can make an informed choice in the election next week. We've tried to create an environment for that. We respect the rights of everyone, so we're operating in a zero tolerance for abusive and intolerant speech. Feel free to debate the issues, but you'll be asked to refrain when against personal attacks in particular. Our host also here prefers that there is no solicitation on the site, and that includes literature. We also want you to restrict your applause. So on the issue of applause, I've talked about this before, but I've done the math. And if we applaud after each person speaks throughout the entire thing, we're talking about up to 25 minutes of applause. So that's time that you could be asking questions instead. So in order to allow that, we'll allow applause after their opening statements, each of the candidates, and we'll allow it at the end. But please try and refrain. And I know that there are some enthusiastic political teams here who want to support their candidates. So we'll ask you to please keep that down as much as you can throughout this discussion so that we have a space where people can really debate ideas and not just hear who's got the loudest applause. So that's the idea behind sort of the restriction around that. This is the format for the debate. We're going to start with opening statements. They'll have 2 minutes each to do that. They've already picked numbers, and I don't know how he did it, but Yasser Naqvi didn't even have a chance to pick a number, but he's first. So they'll each have a chance to speak for 2 minutes, and then the community associations themselves, again, there are 5 of them. They each have a question. The candidates will answer those. And then the fun part of the evening, you'll get a chance to ask your questions, lining up at the microphones, and have a chance. You'll have 60 seconds to ask your question. We've got a situation where mics go off after the time limits for both the candidates and for you. 60 seconds is short. It takes about the time it takes to sing "O Canada." And I know that because I go uphill sometimes, and that's how I do it. So you'll get used to it. As soon as you're cut off the first time, you'll figure that out awful quick. So why don't we let the debate begin? We'll start with with opening statements. And Yasser, you're first to go. And again, you can applaud your candidate for the opening statements, and then that's it. Go ahead.
Thank you, Amanda. And seeing that I'm the first speaker, I think on behalf of all my friends who are here in the front, I want to start by recognizing that we are meeting on the unceded and unsurrendered territory of the Algonquin and the Anishinaabe people. The recognition is important because it's a reminder to all of us that more than words, but especially by action, we have to keep working together on the journey of reconciliation. I also want to take this opportunity to thank all the community associations for organizing this debate. Re-election, I think, is an important forum for all of us to come together and talk about important issues. It's been an honor for me and a privilege for me to serve as your local MPP over the years. From the very beginning, when I first ran, I told you that I'm the kind of person who will roll up his sleeves, will listen to you, will learn from you, and will work with you to find pragmatic solutions to complex problems. And I hope that over the years, you've seen that exactly what I've done. Right here in this room, I remember meetings about overdevelopment or development in our communities without community input. And we talked about how we need to reform the system around land use development and OMB. And together we worked and we brought in new policies. We have replaced OMB with a new system that gives local decision makers, local communities more voice. We did this, you did this, and changed policies across the province. I distinctly remember being in this room talking about residential streets. I think it was Wellington Village Safe Streets that organized a meeting and saying there's too much speeding and that we need to take some responsibility at all levels to find ways to make our streets safer. So we worked together and we changed the legislation, giving our municipalities more power to reduce speed limits to 30 kilometers an hour. That's the kind of work that I have been doing along with you. And if I'm re-elected, my commitment to you is that I'll continue to work hard with you so that we are building a livable community with quality public services for everyone in Ottawa Centre. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and thank you for I asked her for the Algonquin recognition that we're on unceded land. I'd like to thank all the communities, Amanda, especially and all the community associations for inviting me to speak, something that the Glebe community people did not. So I'll be brief. I have a minute and a half to go. I've lived in the riding since 1979. I worked for 32 years or more for Union of the Canadian Union of Public Employees at Carleton University, and I've been active in the labor movement, international solidarity, and peace movements. I retired in 2015, and now I'm on leave from the Ottawa Health Coalition. Our platform calls for demanding a people's alternative. Something is urgently needed after 3 decades of austerity agendas by both the NDP, Conservative, and Liberal governments. We have 3 pillars of our demand. One is full employment, an economy that fits the people, full-time jobs with no loss of pay, short-out work week, and development which is publicly and community developed. We also call for a minimum wage of $20. We like the fact that the $15 came up, but people need more. The other part we want for is universal public services. That's for everyone, regardless of whether they pay, and that includes healthcare, includes education, social housing. We demand 200,000 social housing units we build across the province, real rent control.
And Sherry Wong is next with the Green Party of Canada.
I'd like to also start by acknowledging that we're on unceded, unsurrendered Algonquin territories, and it's nice to use the buzzwords like reconciliation, but it's our duty to actively dismantle colonialism and the systems that we put in place that oppresses Indigenous and people of color every day. I started civic engagement at a very young age. So when I was 7 years old, I joined 100,000 people on the streets of Hong Kong protesting against an amendment that would have infringed on our freedom of speech. And fortunately, a few days after the protest, which is one of the largest protests that's ever been held in Hong Kong, we won. The legislation defeated the amendment. And that was when I realized that the people always has the power. So I'm here today because I want to earn your trust to be your MPP in Queen's Park. They always say that politics is all about the traditional parties, and we can see from yesterday's leaders' debate, the Greens were excluded. And I want to ensure you that's not the truth. Your vote is your power to choose. And I want to encourage you to utilize this power to choose for something that is going to affect real change. Choose for something that is going to be, choose someone that's actually going to represent your values. So I ask you to be brave. Vote for the change that you believe in. And this is about who's going to represent you, and I hope you make the right choice. Thank you.
Joel Harden is with the NDP.
Thanks, Amanda, and thanks to the organizers. Thanks, Yasser, too, for starting us off in the right way, acknowledging our responsibility as treaty peoples. And thank you all. My goodness, look at this room. If there was a worry about interest in our democracy in this part of our riding, we can lay that to rest. I am so honored that all of you folks have come tonight. Like Cherie, I want to begin tonight on a personal note. The reason I'm up here, apart from my mom and dad and friends who sustained me throughout my life, are two people, Jack Layton and Olivia Chow, who took interest in a graduate student very cynical about politics in the mid-1990s at a time when our province was being run by very belligerent conservative voices. Not the conservative, loving voice of my grandmother, Presbyterian woman in rural Ontario who raised me. Somebody, Mike Harris, who believed that it was his way or the highway all the time. And a mayor, Mel Lastman, who often thought the same. But what Jack and Olivia showed me, and what I hope we can talk about tonight, is that it is possible to pursue ambitious change. It is possible to raise people's expectations. And where I disagree with my colleague is that pragmatic solutions to complex problems is not the narrative I think we need in this moment. I see the threat of climate change starkly and the need to retrofit our city and our province accordingly. I see too many seniors without access to home care or adequate long-term care. I see too many young people feeling like they're left behind, particularly queer and trans young people who don't feel acknowledged and valued. And I see a province that is rich in resources, that doesn't have a wealth problem. It has a wealth distribution problem. So our province can send a message, I think, across the entire country, and this riding, so full of compassionate people I've come to understand and have the benefit to meet, can send a message. And I hope that's the note we can strike tonight. Thanks for having me.
Judith, go ahead, Judith. Oh, hang on, Colleen, just 1 second.
Oh, no, let her finish, sorry.
No, go ahead, quickly, go ahead.
I was just testing the weather outside. I know there's a lot of people standing at the back and it's hotter back there. This will sound crazy, but we've done it before. If you want to go stand outside, we've opened the windows. You can hear everything, and there's actually a breeze out there. And we promise to let you back in later.
There'll be empty seats. Go ahead, Colleen.
Kind of new at this. My name is Colleen McCleary. I'm the Ontario PC candidate. I wanted to thank you as well for coming out. And everybody's schedule is always very busy, so I appreciate people coming out to get to know us, the candidates. A little bit about me first. I grew up in Montreal. I speak French. Je parle français. I went to the University of Waterloo, took systems and design engineering. After a few years in manufacturing and high tech, I took my MBA and worked as a management consultant. And at the age of 50, I pursued my lifelong dream and went to medical school and obtained my Doctor of Medicine. The reason I am running is my greatest joy in life is helping others. And it's why I went to medical school, but I have enjoyed canvassing so much. I've listened to people, engaged with people. And I think politics is like medicine. You get to talk to people, you get to break barriers with people, and you get to feel that you've done something for the better of of people. I also feel that for me, one of the biggest priorities is our debt and our financial mess. I was on CFRA with John Budden the other day, emphasizing that our debt is just continuing to grow. We've had 9 good years, and in those 9 years, we've doubled our debt. Our revenue is projected to drop. We're looking at a 2 rather than 3. I'm off? No, I'm not off. There's something wrong with the mic. Okay, thank you. Thank you. So I have a 35 seconds. Anyway, so I was looking at the numbers today actually, and it scared me because I was thinking, my God, we could be at 500 billion debt in the next 7 years. Our services are increasing in costs. Our revenue will be dropping. That deficit is added every year to our debt. That's a concern. Healthcare is very important to me because I am a doctor, and I also consider mental health extremely important. I think too many of our seniors are lonely, and I've seen, what happens. And so elder care, mental health, healthcare are all very important to me. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for those opening statements. So the second part, we're going to hear from the 5 community associations. Each has a question. The candidates will have 60 seconds to answer the questions from the community association. And we will go first in this order from Cherie that way. Okay. And we start with, who's our first speaker? It is Champlain Park.
Hi, can people hear me? Good. My name is Jenny Hornesty, and I'm asking this question on behalf of the Champlain Park Community Association. Climate change is Climate change is causing increased extreme weather, such as floods, heat waves, ice storms, and other impacts, such as Lyme disease and the emerald ash borer that we are feeling directly in Ottawa. In addition, densification that is not protecting our urban tree cover and causing more impermeable surfaces is making things worse. What do you specifically propose to do to address climate change? Thank you.
Sherry, and with the Green Party, go ahead.
I'm thankful, Jenny, for bringing up Lyme disease because my partner is suffering from chronic Lyme disease. He was diagnosed earlier this year. He's been suffering it for 10 years. And one of the issues with Lyme disease is that OHIP actually doesn't cover any treatment. I know the question's about climate change, so let's go back to that. The Green Party and I are committed to moving Ontario into carbon neutral by 2050 because we know that the climate change crisis is costing us billions and billions of dollars and is costing us in health. We need to act now, and we need a strong, aggressive plan. We don't need a cap and trade program that will allow companies to buy off their carbon credits. We need a carbon tax plan that actually discourages companies from releasing more pollution into our air. And of course, the Green being very climate conscious, we're committed to combating climate change. Thank you.
Okay, and Stuart Ryan is next.
Thank you for the question. We are in a crisis, and we need to work on it immediately. We would replace cap and trade and carbon tax with a penalty for polluters. They have to pay for what they're doing there, and strong emission standards. We'd have a publicly owned green energy industry, and we phase out nuclear power. And we'd reject all tar sands related projects, like the Energy East came through here, and fracking as well. The #1 state in the United States that has earthquakes is Oklahoma because of fracking.
Nakvi.
Thank Thank you very much. I think there's no denying that climate change is a real concern, and we have to address it, and we have to deal with it by putting price on pollution. Ontario has adopted a cap and trade system to put price on carbon and to bring down greenhouse gas emissions. The monies that are raised from that, we need to make sure that we invest smartly. So we've already have taken dirty coal out of our electricity system. That was the number one thing we have done to reduce GHGs. The next two big areas that we need to invest in is one, in our built environment, make sure our homes and our buildings and our schools and our hospitals are energy efficient. So we should take those cap and trade money and do that. And secondly, in our transportation sector. And the two specific things from our community's perspective that I'm keen about is make sure that we continue to build public transit so that we have electrified light rail available to us, and also to invest money to build more cycling and pedestrian safe infrastructure so that you really do have an alternative to use other modes of transportation than just driving.
Colleen.
Okay. We do not plan to apply any carbon tax. Our research and what we believe is it's a tax that is not effective in changing people's behavior, and it costs, if we're going with the NDP projection, $2,000 a year for your car to run, and if the natural gas, another $2,500. However, my research has shown it would take one nuclear reactor per day in order to make any difference in terms of that 2 degrees of global warming. And the current tax is not being used for green projects. It's in several provinces, just extra money that's brought in and spent in other ways, not towards green projects, not making a difference. Thank you.
And Joel.
Thank you for the question. I have taught in this area at Carleton for the last number of years, and I was part of the movement against the Energy East pipeline. I was proud to work on that with Ecology Ottawa and other friends in the city. But at the same time, the threat of climate change for me is not just about saying no to stuff. It's about saying yes to stuff. And where I'll give my friend from the Liberal Party credit, the decision to phase out coal in the province was a major benefit to this province. But the decision to go halfway on renewable energy was not. The FIT and the microfit programs have been great. We've got innovators like the Ottawa Renewable Energy Cooperative, which is in this area of the city, that have done great things. But my friends in Denmark and Sweden and Finland and even societies like China and India are ambitiously embracing renewable energy. And moreover, on a local note, the decision to invest $100 million to expand Highway 417 is a step in the wrong direction. That $100 million should be put into lowering our transit fares, which are the highest in Ontario, and expanding cycling infrastructure, as my friend suggests.
We have another community question, and we're going to start with Stuart and go down. Okay. Looking for the Hampton, Iona question.
Hi there, I'm Margaret, and Hampton Iona Community Group has asked me to put forth our question. For many lower income seniors, the cost of property tax, particularly in popular inner city neighborhoods, can be one of their single largest expenses. Since the provincial government is involved in setting how property taxes are charged, what would your party do to either make property tax more affordable for such seniors, or to provide financial support to municipalities so they could lower or defer property taxes for lower income seniors?
Property tax. There we go. We see the property tax as a anti-progressive tax. It's a reactionary tax. So in terms of the way the municipalities are financed, is what we would take them off that and put them on provincial grants, and we'd use the provincial tax system for that. So that's the major way we'd do it. I'm a senior myself. I can't afford a house, so I'd be also developing social housing so that the needs for taxing on property is reduced.
Yes, Sir Nakvi.
So Thank you for the question. And this is a very complex question, and I won't profess that I have the answer to the question. MPEG is one issue that I've discussed with many of the constituents, and something that I want to explore further as to, is there a better way of assessing our home values than what it is right now, which is fair market value. The issue really surrounds is are there better alternatives, such as income or square footage or a combination thereof? There are all kinds of variety of opinions, but fair market value is something that is used as the most common method pretty much all across North America. So I look forward to exploring this. I know municipality like City of Ottawa already have some programs for seniors to reduce the rates. One of the ideas that I have explored is if you could freeze seniors' property taxes, the current rate, and then whatever the increases may be.
Okay, so Colleen McCleary is next.
Okay, property taxes are taxes for affordable living. So I would include that in the case for more affordable housing for seniors. Recently, I met with a co-op housing association, and I lived in a co-op, and I think it's a fantastic solution for low-income seniors, partly because it meets the needs for socialization and community. And community is very important for seniors who have past, the working age and don't have the social connections that we all need for mental health. Also, I would keep the existing, our party would keep the existing funding. And since there is such a long waiting list for affordable housing of 10,000 currently waiting to get, and most of these people are seniors, we would work to try to increase building more properties for low-income seniors. Thank you.
Joel.
Thanks for the question. When we canvassed seniors organizations in Ontario, what we heard were there were many ways to make a senior's life more affordable. Important for me is this button that I'm wearing. It jokes that the NDP this time is running on a platform with teeth. And the reference there is to universal dental care, which is something we're running on, that I'm very proud to be running on. 2/3 of people in this province, seniors, do not have access to dental care. And after having knocked on over 50,000 doors with a fantastic group of volunteers over the last 8 months, I am really tired and hurt every time I talk to a senior with an abscess in their tooth that sleeps with pain and that suffers. And it's time for a government to extend the Medicare system, but to do it for all. We also believe, as my colleague from the Conservative Party said, in building more affordable housing. Our goal through our big capital investments is to build 65,000 new units of affordable housing in Ontario. But as I'll get into later tonight, we're going to ask the wealthier folks in this province to pay more tax so we can make that happen.
And Sherry with the Green Party.
I think we really need to focus on the keywords here. Low-income seniors. So I'll start with the word seniors. You've paid enough to our society. You've built this great province up for me, for my generation to live in. And it is our duty to take care of you. And going back to the low income words, no one should ever have to live below poverty line. And that's why we need to implement a basic income guarantee. The Green Party is the only party on this issue that actually stands for a livable income for everyone, so that everyone can live with dignity and not have to worry about paying for mortgage or their medication or healthy food for their kids. Because if everyone can live above poverty line and with that basic income, you wouldn't have to worry about paying your property tax. You wouldn't have to worry about paying for your medication or healthcare.
Okay, and we now have a question from the folks at McCullough Park. And, Yasser Naqvi, you are first.
Hi, I'm Dan O'Hagan from the McCullough Park Community Association. McCullough Park is just west of Westboro Village, and it's a mature neighborhood right on the edge of downtown. We used to be in the far west of Ottawa. Now we're on the edge of downtown. Right now, it's in full development mode. Infill is squeezing out working and middle class families, and it's also reducing our tree canopy. Big deal, lots of trees, fewer trees than there used to be. The new LRT across the northern edge of the community is creating pressure for development, especially along Richmond Road. Most of it is high rise. It's changing the nature of our community. The west end of Ottawa, especially Kitchissippi Ward, is already short of green space and parks compared to the rest of the city. How do we make urban intensification, which is provincial policy, compatible with retaining the nature of these neighborhoods, which have been affordable, characterized by a mix of income levels, and having lots of tree cover? Finally, how do we
A very good and important question, and 60 seconds are not enough to answer the question. But it's an important one, and this is exactly where I've spent so much time over the years working with you in making sure that we've got a land use development process that is what I call community inspired, where community voices are relevant, have meaning to it. And that's why we change the laws around making sure that we are giving more authority to our municipalities in terms of updating their official plans, updating community design plans, and having far more enforcement power than we've had in the past. Also taking the capacity away from now gone OMB from overruling the community and the local decision makers and putting decisions that were not reflective of the community. The new local planning appeal tribunal have a totally different standard of review and decision making to ensure that those important elements of community are in place. It's a new system. It's much better than what we have in the past, and we need to make sure.
Colleen McCleary with the.
I think the LRT, the intent should be to reduce congestion, to reduce the number of cars on the road, and to even parking spaces that are used for all these houses. And I lived in New York City. It was a beautiful city with lots of greenery and lots of parks. And I believe that the planning should be around multi-unit dwellings as opposed to large sprawling houses. If you're going to have urban intensification, then you need to have multi-unit. You can have beautiful multi-unit buildings that take up far less space in the city. And, I think this is more of a municipal than a provincial issue, but I would support more local influence in multi-unit buildings as opposed to large houses.
Arden with NDP.
Well, I want to thank you for asking the question because my party is coming at this from the perspective of having listened to the housing advocates in the city, like the Centertown Citizens Ottawa Corporation and others, who are telling us that basically at this moment in our history in the city, what gets built is what 6 or 7 major developers decide gets built. And communities can object, but regardless if it's the OMB or the latest incarnation of the OMB, that is not shifting the balance of power in our cities. What we need is a province that will set regulations, and the tool is something called inclusionary zoning, I've been taught to believe. And my uncles, you may be funny to find this out, are in the development business in Quebec, and that is the law in Montreal. When you build a building over 100 units, you have to have affordable rental housing set aside. We see a goal of 30% of new builds having affordable rental housing. We want to protect the tree canopy in our city, and we want to tell our politicians that we elect them, not developers, politicians who make the decisions with you.
And Sherry Wong.
The issue of these new developments becoming these expensive condos that nobody can afford, it is a huge concern because they're making money, the developers, and it's easy to shift the responsibility to municipalities to decide who deserves that affordable housing. But I believe it should be a provincial initiative to ensure that everyone gets affordable housing. And especially with the LRT development, it gives us such a great opportunity to ensure that lower income families can have accessible housing that could transport anywhere in the city. And that's why we want to mandate 1 in 5 new housing development to be affordable housing. And we're going to fund municipalities for their green infrastructure programs to ensure that in these new developments, that green spaces are protected and these green spaces will be available for the new residents that's going to be moving into these new development areas.
And Stuart Ryan, you were last.
Thank you. I live in Centertown. I live in CCFC housing. Everywhere you look, there's another condo going up. Luxury things as well. and an intensification at the corner of Carling and Preston. There's a 45-story one going up. So that's part of the municipal plan for development, and it's going to destroy neighborhoods like yours. We need community input in that. We need the ability to for the community to have a say in that. I know that was an issue in this ward during the municipal election and in Kitchissippi ward. And fortunately, the developer candidate lost.
We now have a question from Wellington Village. Colleen, you will be first.
Jason Thompson, representing Wellington Village Community Association. The City of Ottawa will build a stretch of the LRT rail system, Phase 2, along the Ottawa River, a decision based in part on saving money. This will increase house prices in our neighborhoods as further intensification occurs and add more traffic on Wellington Street and Richmond Road, a street which is already at or near capacity. As the province is a major funder of the LRT, what would your party do to mitigate the negative traffic impacts, which we are already experiencing, and to provide our increasingly crowded neighborhoods with needed services such as pools and community centers?
My perception of the purpose of the LRT would be that people would be using the LRT and there would be less traffic than what you're mentioning on Wellington Street. So from my perspective, the whole purpose of the transit is to decrease congestion and decrease traffic. Having lived in a city such as New York, where people don't drive, people take the subway, that's what I would expect for Wellington. And in terms of services, I think a community like Westboro has many pockets of communities and services that they've already developed, and that the LRT would bring more business to.
And Joel Harden.
Thanks for the question. One of the things I'm very happy to say about our platform Change for the Better is that we're getting back into the game of funding public transit at the municipal level. Our goal is to add $300 million to Ottawa's budget to make sure that the province is back into funding public transit at a rate of 50%, which used to be the objective. That used to be the objective. And what that would do is not just with the LRT, but also with our bus system, which is well used. It would hopefully, deal with the congestion that you're talking about. But I also want to say this as a cyclist, a year-round cyclist in the city. We have a lot more that we can do to make sure that public funds allow for safe cycling. And I know the great Jeff Leeper is among the many loud advocates in this riding for this. I'm happy to work with Jeff and other cycling advocates to make this happen. But we also have to remember, Phase 2 of the LRT at this moment is funded through a public-private partnership model, which will cost us a lot more than if we source it publicly and build it publicly. And I think we have to use the people's money wisely.
Sherry.
One of the things I discussed over this weekend was with some folks that lives between the War Museum and downtown core. I'm not sure what that neighborhood is called, but this one resident was very, very passionate because she was saying that I moved here because it's close to access to buses, but there's no grocery store. Where am I going to do my groceries? And I think that part of it, it's about meeting the needs of the community and meeting the needs of human beings. Being able to access grocery stores, pools, community centers to give that recreational side as well as that human needs to be met. And another thing, I know I'm running out of time, on the LRT, we need to invest more in our public transit to actually make it accessible for people to use it. And if we use our public money to encourage more people to stop driving, then we need to give them real alternatives, like complete streets where you can walk and cycle and feel safe on that street.
Stuart Ryan.
Well, I've heard a lot of good answers from the candidates, most of which I support. And I have supported light rail transit. I use the buses. They're a lot. I used to have a car. To go to karate right down the street here. But now I take the bus. So I'm in favor of that. But we need communities that people can live in, and so we would support ability of the community to direct how the development's done in it. Thank you.
Thank you. This is a very important question. So our major thoroughfares like Wellington and Richmond and Scott Street and Sir John A. Macdonald Parkway, speaking east-west, Bronson or Bank Street speaking north-south, are clogged because people come to downtown for work. That's where most of those cars are coming from. And by building LRT, we're creating an opportunity to give them an alternative for them not to drive their cars, but to actually take the train, which is a good thing. What we also need to do along with the buildup of LRT that is taking place is to build complementary infrastructure around better cycling and pedestrian use, so that those of us who live in this community have access to that complementary civic infrastructure. And the other thing that I'm really keen on, and if I'm reelected, that I want to work on, is to revitalize the link with Quebec by revitalizing the Prince of Wales Bridge, because it's high time that we run a train to Quebec as well and make sure that we reduce the number of cars coming from the other side of the border. And
You'll get it. You'll get it, Yasser. Our final. Yeah. Our final community question is from Westboro Beach.
My name is Bonnie Campbell. I'm with the Westboro Beach Community Association. Kitchissippi Ward has seen lots of new development and intensification in the last 5 years. Unfortunately, it has meant that many people renting in Westboro and Hintonburg have been forced out of our neighborhood. Many want affordable housing, but the registry for affordable housing in the city is, I think, 7 years. Our two housing shelters at Forward Avenue and Richmond Plaza, which is also slated for being torn down for a condo, are full to capacity. What is your party's plans for affordable housing?
With Joel?
Well, I have the benefit of already having mentioned our belief in inclusionary zoning in the private sector, that we need to ask our friends in the development community to do their fair share. There's a lot of money to still be made in development, but we need to make sure that some of those beautiful units are put aside for affordable rental housing at the developer's expense. We also believe in real rent control, and that is something the NDP will do. We will bring in rent control that exists when tenants move out of their units as well, which is the major loophole at the moment that landlords take advantage of. And I've talked to too many renters who feel trapped in their apartments, and they feel they can't move out. And their other option is to move out into rural reaches of the city, and that has a climate change impact. So we need real rent control for a variety of reasons. And last, but absolutely not least, we have to build affordable housing. We're pledging to build 65,000 new units of affordable housing province-wide, a fair amount of which will be right here in Ottawa. We're pledging to do it by raising taxes on wealthy individuals, over $200,000 and $300,000, and raising the corporate tax rate by 1.5%.
Sherry.
Like I said earlier, we want to ensure that 1 in 5 new housing developments are affordable housing, because we know that neighborhoods get these new developments and suddenly it's become a new neighborhood. It's for richer folks to live there, and we don't want to see that. One of the other things is, of course, increasing funding for social and co-op housing, because currently the status of them they're falling apart, and we need to ensure that these existing infrastructures don't fall apart. I want to propose creative solutions to the housing issue, because the issue isn't about the number of units available. We have plenty of units available in Ottawa. Is that the vacant properties aren't being rented out at a reasonable price. They're still trying to make money off their vacant properties. And that's why the Greens want to tax these vacant properties, to ensure that they actually are rented out and not leave people out waiting. And provincially, we actually have a 10-year waiting list, and that is unacceptable.
Stuart Ryan.
We definitely agree with rent control and rent rollbacks. Currently, the loophole that Joel mentioned is there. It only applies to older buildings. It doesn't apply to new housing. So inclusionary zoning is needed. So they say 200,000 is needed. I live in CCOC housing. People in cooperatives, they're needed for seniors. They're needed for everyone. Thank you.
There's two things that we need to do. One, we need to continue to build more new affordable housing. Ontario has set a target of ending chronic homelessness by 2025. We have some really good momentum happening in our city, where projects like at Carlington community, where we're building 42 residences for seniors, in Westboro, Cornerstone Housing Women building for chronically homeless women. There's a project by John Howard Society happening in Mechanicsville. So we need to continue with the momentum. The second thing we need to do, what Joel was talking about, is inclusionary zoning. Now, Ontario has already passed the law on that. That is already happening. It's not that will happen, it already has happened. The key is now to work with the municipality to make sure that we have, with the new development, a mixed housing, both affordable rental and affordable housing. And if I'm privileged to be reelected, that is one of the areas that I want to work with our city councilors like Leaper and McKenney, who are really keen in making sure that as we develop new housing, there is mixed.
Almost. And Colleen McClary.
We feel that the problem is a supply issue. Obviously, the system as it currently exists doesn't work. So our plan is also to build more units. And in order to do this, to work with builders and provide subsidizing. We plan to continue the 7.7 billion that's in the budget for co-op and subsidized housing. And we would want a system that people don't need, that isn't 10,000 people waiting for housing, for affordable housing. We want to increase the supply so that people have it within a year. Thank you.
Okay, so this is the fun part, I think, right? So this is the part where you get to ask the candidates questions. And again, decorum and respect and all that goes. You will have 2 mics to line up at, and you will have, you'll have 60 seconds, and then you get the so just a few things about those. I got it right here. So the rules for this process. So we'll have you line up at the microphones, which you figured out right away. Each person will get 60 seconds to ask, and the candidates will have 90 seconds to answer. You can ask 1 or 2 candidates the same question. If you prefer, I'll figure out who the second person is. If you just want to ask one person, that's fine. Please don't line up and keep lining up at the end, because we want to encourage everyone. Sometimes it takes you a few seconds to figure out what you want to ask, and you look at that line, and if it looks endless forever, you may not get up the guts to get up there and ask. So we want to make that space at the end of the line for someone who hasn't asked before. What else? We also want to make sure that if you are working with a campaign, that you let the community members ask the questions for this one. If you're really, really keen in a community, you have to out yourself and tell us who you are. If that, please respect other audience members and listen to the answers that are given from the respondents. We didn't have a chance to include Bruce Faulkner with the Libertarian Party on our panel, but we're going to give him the first question. Bruce, you're going to ask the question, you're going to answer it yourself as the first person. So,
my name is Bruce Faulkner. I just want to introduce myself. I'm a resident of Ottawa. I lived 51 years in this city. Mine's a rhetorical question. And you know what? I got a great opportunity. There's 5 individuals up here that are running political parties, but I have all you guys that I want to ask the question to. How long do you have? How long do you guys have to put false hope in these people? I've gone through Conservative Party for 30 years. My parents were conservative before that. You got to take responsibility. You guys have to really make a change and not vote for the worst of, well, we're getting rid of the Liberal. We're getting rid of the spender. It's not a joke. It's not something we can make light of. It's going to get serious real quick for a lot of people, and a lot of people in this area are going to face increased taxes for a transit system that Yasser seems to spew as a marvel of technology when other cities are doing Uber and getting away with transit. Please, my question to you is, how long do you have to waste on a political party? 4 more years? 10 more years? I don't. I'm a libertarian because there's no hope for me in these parties. There's a libertarian out there. I know there in this group, there's somebody that's thinking like me, saying there's no hope. I've moved out of this area from taxation. I live in Ottawa South now, in a rural area. It's a beautiful area. It's community. It's people that take care of people in community. So my question again is, how long do you have? Thank you.
Did you want to ask a question? No, it's a question. Okay. So why don't we start over on the side and go ahead and ask your question in 60 seconds.
Okay. My name is Ana Maria Cruz Valderrama. I'm a social activist and community leader. My question is for the NDP. I'm very concerned because you are asking about or talking about increasing taxes for corporations and rich people. Canada is a small market. I like to be practical. Canada has around 37 million consumers. Okay, if you increase the taxes, we have capital fly. Companies will go to Mexico or to Brazil. We know that we have a trading war already with the United States. NAFTA is very unstable. So if you increase these taxes, you will decrease the opportunities for jobs. So I'm very concerned about the young people for jobs because the capital fly, that's what has happened. Companies will go with larger markets. Mexico has 105 million people. Put that 50% are poor. You have 52 million, larger than Canadian market. Thank you.
Everyone has to speak that fast.
Well, thank you for the question. And I wanted to be straight up tonight, and I've tried to be straight up in the entire campaign. We are promising to raise our revenue from somewhere. We will not privatize hydro to raise $4 billion to pay for our promises. We won't run deficits that the Auditor General will disagree with in their size. We are going to folks who are well off, which includes me, by the way. I'm married to a physician. It's the only reason I can take 8 months of my life and throw myself at an opportunity like this. And in my family and in many families, I've had the great fortune to talk to who are affluent in this riding. If we make the connection between taxes and services, which is something that Ed Broadbent has begged us to do for decades, to have an adult conversation on taxes, to say if we don't have sufficient revenue, we can't provide our crumbling schools with the necessary infrastructure they need, or our hospitals. And my family, as I disclosed before, is in business, commercial real estate. And it's not difficult for business people to understand that they exist within an infrastructure. And if that health and education infrastructure, if mental health supports are not available, if the city of Ottawa has 13 detox beds and an opioid emergency going on, we have a revenue problem. So we have to go to those more affluent, like me, and we have to say to us, it's time for us to pay more towards our collective prosperity so everybody in this society gets a fair shot. I would like Canada and Ontario to be more like Denmark. I would like us to be more like Sweden, where millionaires are more happy in those countries because everyone is better off.
I was just looking at that because that's something as a very fiscally prudent person, I'm very concerned about. And the best article I've read is by the chief economist of the Conference Board of Canada, Craig Oliver, who gave 6 reasons why deficit spending is a terrible idea. And one of those points was that when there's a deficit, businesses become cautious. They invest less. There's less productivity, there's less jobs, all because they expect increased taxes. And if there's increased taxes, they don't have to stay here. It's a global economy. So yes, I do believe that it's not a good idea to have corporations being taxed more.
Good evening. My name's Suzanne, and I want to ask a question about OCDC, about the jail in the East End. So I want to ask the question to Joel and to Yasser. So 1 year ago, the Ontario government announced that it plans to build a new jail in Ottawa that will be 25% bigger, 140 more spaces, and at a cost of
$500 million to $1 billion. A large number of the people locked up at the Ottawa jail have mental health issues or drug issues. They're often poor, homeless, racialized, and often incarcerated because of minor nonviolent charges or relatively trivial breaches of bail conditions. Given this, do you think that spending $500 million to $1 billion building a bigger jail is most effective? There you go.
So I've been involved in this file for a few years now, both in my capacity as the Minister of Community Safety and Correctional Services and my current role as the Attorney General. And I will say to you, I'll be the first one to say, if anybody tells you that the best way to deal with issues around safety and helping people is just by simply building a new jail, I've been on record saying absolutely not. What we really need to focus on is changing our system, making sure that we are putting more focus on rehabilitation and reintegration. And I have, over the last few years, have been doing that work, not just by myself, but actually taking inspiration and learning from a lot of the experts. Many of them are right here in this room, so that we have rewritten the legislation around corrections for the first time in the province, focusing on reintegration and rehabilitation. We have changed our bail policy so that our focus is that those individuals who are low risk and vulnerable are released in the community so they can get mental health and addiction supports. In fact, for the very first time in Ontario since I became the AG, we're using justice dollars to provide for mental health services in the community. We're using justice dollars to provide housing in the community. We have started the process, the important process, to make sure that we are providing better services, because that's how we build better communities. But I can also tell you that OCDC, the current jail, is not suitable to provide any kind of programming whatsoever, not to mention it's got a huge workplace safety issues that raises concerns. So we need a better facility.
Well, I want to thank you for the question, because I teach in the Department of Law and Legal Studies at Carleton University, and many of my colleagues have been in the forefront of trying to educate us. And I connect with this personally, because when my mom's first marriage fell apart and I moved back to rural Eastern Ontario with her and my little brother, I was 3 years old at the time, we were on social assistance for 4 years. And those are rough years. There was not a lot of money to go around. And I often think to myself, as folks have educated me on the terrible conditions at the jail and who ends up in the jail, always poor, disproportionately Indigenous, Black and Brown people, people struggling with mental health illnesses. What constantly occurs to me is that aphorism, there but for fortune go I. What would have happened to me? What would have happened to anybody we know if you fall into chronic poverty, chronic lack of treatment for mental health services or drug addiction services? And the Ottawa Carleton Detention Center right now is a testament to who gets left out of our society. 70% of people who are still there are on remand, which is criminal justice speak for they've been accused, but they've not been convicted. And they stay there despite the bail reforms because they're poor. If it were me, I wouldn't be there. That is, pardon me? That is a testament to what goes wrong. I agree with Yasser in our criminal justice system, but the Liberals have had 15 years to fix it. And what I pledge to do as your MPP is speak loudly against the creation of a new jail, the 148 new spaces we don't need. We need real.
Go ahead.
Hi, I'm Dr. Bruce Hutchison, a clinical psychologist. And speaking of people who are poor, they have a hard time getting to see me because I charge them a fee. So it's difficult when people come to see me to ask me to save their lives if they're suicidal, and they have to pay me to do that because there's no funding for psychologists to have for people in the public to come and see us. I know we need to have an increase in mental health services, and that's good, but we need to have an increase in access to psychologists who are trained at the highest level to provide this service, and right now that access is not there. So what would you do about that? I'm asking these three here, Joel, Yasser, and your sign's turned off, so I...
For me, mental health, I have a strong belief in it, and I understand where you're coming from. I know the psychology fees are, a lot for many people to afford. All I can say is we're putting a total of $3.8 billion into mental health, addiction, and housing, and we don't have everything mapped out yet, but we need more psychology, more mental health, more everything. We don't have enough psychiatrists. So, you know, I can see that as part of the solution. I mean, I've always thought there's so many psychologists and the price is sort of just out of limit, and the line for psychiatry is, yeah, years long. So, you know, I do believe that there should be a solution there. And what that solution, I'm not sure, but I would support that solution. I think mental health, as a doctor, I remember first year medicine, someone saying it's easy to give somebody a blood pressure pill to control their blood pressure. Try to work with their mental state. It's critical. And it probably caused as many, you know, deaths as anything else does. It's critical.
Thank you for the question. I'm married to a psychiatrist who works in the eating disorders program at CHEO, and I hear firsthand of what happens to families who are in utter crisis when their loved ones experience utter distress. We have pledged to create 4,500 new mental health care worker jobs in the province of Ontario. There isn't a strict formula as to what jobs those will be. And as your MPP, if you give me the privilege to be that person, I will absolutely fight for psychological support. I will fight also to make sure that psychiatric support in our hospitals is extended. What I've heard from people who are practitioners privately, other psychologists like Anchor Services here locally, I know those folks, is their doors are, they're full. There is an oversupply of people coming through their door. But rather like the conversation I've had with dentists, you know, they see the same thing, and it crushes their soul to know that there are people they can't help for financial reasons. So what I think a government has to do with good principles is raise the funds necessary to pay for the support that we need. 13 detox beds in the city of Ottawa. What I've heard from families in critical mental health situations is there's the Royal Ottawa Hospital, there's CHEO, and there's families. And families are taking up the vast majority of support for people who are in crisis, and that's not right. I think we have to do a lot better of a job looking after each other, and thank you, by the way, for your work in doing that.
Thank you. I mean, I think we will all agree there is no health without mental health. We have come a long way in terms of breaking stigma around mental health, and there's more recognition that we have to deal with this. This is a very important election in the sense that all major parties are actually talking about investment in mental health. That's a good thing, that we're all on the same page. One of the things that I've learned talking to a lot of people, including Bruce, you've been very helpful to me in raising the issue, is that we have a serious issue around capacity at the local community level. That's where we need to invest. And we need to invest in the entire continuum of care. Things like youth workers and social workers, psychotherapists, psychologists, and psychiatrists, depending on where you are on the spectrum in terms of the care you need. And the investments, and all parties are speaking about investments in pretty much the same ballpark. The investments that we're talking about, we need to make sure, and my commitment is that we make those investments at the local community level, and we build up that capacity at a community level from a prevention point of view. High schools are a really good place to start so that we are working with our young people from the very beginning. But that's where the focus needs to be. And I'm very much committed to working with the experts, organizations like Family Service or Jewish Services Ottawa, to ensure that we are investing that money at the right level within the community to create that capacity.
Okay, so we're done. Look at the long line behind you if you're asking a question, and we want you to ask just one or two people, because if you ask 3 or 4 people, the people behind you won't get a chance to ask the question, okay?
My name is Shotzi Duffy. As a woman who spent the last 20 years listening to women who are trying to recover from their abortion experiences, I deeply decry Mr. Nakvi's enactment of the bubble zone, which effectively squelches my freedom of speech. So given that this law means that if I choose to spend my time on the street, and I've been there, so although I know that the intimidation law is just that, if I respectfully choose to share alternative choices for women who might be interested in them, I will be put in jail. And my question is this just?
in the question, and I guess you and I will disagree. I very strongly believe, and so is
I agree with you. I would not have, that's a legal right, and that's my view.
Is not to be infringed on at any moment in time. And you're right. My body is my choice. And if you chose not to have an abortion, that's your choice. I'm not going to infringe on your right to choose not to. But my right and any other woman's right and any person's bodily autonomy belongs to them. And me, I was there against the March for Life for a reason. Because I believe we live in a country of freedom and no one should make a medical choice for me. Nobody.
My name is Joe, and I'm going to start federal and come down. Right now, the Federal Department of Finance and the Bank of Canada estimate that the unemployment rate that you can't go below without getting accelerating inflation is 6%. That's where we are. So they are now going to be trying to get real GDP growth to match productivity growth and labor force growth, and you're looking at about 2% right now. So what I want to know is for those parties, what growth for real GDP do you have for Ontario? Because it can't differ much from the national number. Do you have under your platform in your case, Yasser, and in your case, Colleen, with your leader saying he's going to have a booming economy? The federal government isn't going to allow much more than 2% unless you get productivity growth way up.
I mean, our party stands to me for prosperity, building businesses, generating revenues so that we can have all the services and improve the lives of people. We are looking at reducing corporate taxes. So that's a start, reducing taxes on small businesses, holding minimum wage. And but in terms of prosperity, my view is that that comes from education. And we need to focus our education on the job market. We need to improve our standards. We need to have more children focused on the STEM programs. I know our competitiveness is dropping. Every bank in the country, large bank, has said we're not competitive with the world anymore. Our students are not equal in terms of international education. So in the sense that I'd like to say we're trying to improve the business climate, and that is a strong focus, a very strong focus for our party. It's the top 5 priority is to create a business environment for prosperity so that we can provide services.
So I'm not an expert in the area, but what I have learned that there's 2 things we need to do to increase our productivity. And you're right, that's where we need to focus on. One is, of course, leveraging technology and artificial intelligence, for example, and the work that's happening there around in terms of mechanizing workforce or finding those efficiencies is one way to increase productivity. But I think one of the serious issues that we're trying to address in this election, at least from my party's perspective, is how do we make our workforce more productive? One of the biggest challenges the middle class is facing right now is around elder care and childcare. My generation of people who have elderly parents or grandparents that needs to be looked after, and young kids. And we're finding ourselves half a day to a day every week, one of the partners taking time off to look after one or the other. That's where I think the government can play a very important role by making robust investments in better elder care, home care, long-term care, better services for our seniors, and ensuring that we've got childcare, good quality, affordable childcare available to them, because that will allow us to be more productive in our workplaces. That is what exactly the Liberal Party is talking about. And that's why we're saying we're willing, in this good economic times, we're willing to borrow some money, less than 1% of our GDP, so we can invest back into people to increase their productivity, because that will result in economic growth and increase in tax base.
Evelyn, I've lived in the ward for 35 years now, and what I'm really, really vexed about for the whole province is the growing economic inequality. So I'm addressing the question to Stuart Ryan and Joel Harden. What are the policies of your party to address growing economic inequality?
Thanks for the question. What they do to do sort of a revolution? What do we need? We need economy that puts people first, that expands social programs, increases the minimum wage, not bring it down as the conservative just mentioned. They're going to get rid of the $15 minimum wage if they get elected. We need at least $20. We'd have economic development that is publicly owned and controlled, and we need all the social services we have that produce a well-educated population that can make the technological changes needed to create prosperity. One of the things that's done, Ontario already has the lowest corporate tax rates in North America, except for maybe Alabama. And we can't always go running to the bottom just because Trump lowered his tax rates. We've got to do the same. We've lost $118 billion over the last 20 years in corporate taxes that haven't been paid. They've been sitting on money. Mark Carney spoke at the Unified Convention saying that in 2012 there was $600 billion that they weren't prepared to invest. The money's.
Well, thank you. I've already spoken tonight about our plan to raise revenue. I want to try to be blunt in the interests of a sweaty, difficult room, even though I'm so impressed you're all still here. We have to stop Doug Ford. With all due respect, Colleen, we have to stop Doug Ford and people like him because they have been a parasitical force on our society. There's a moment at which when you get wealthy enough in this province, with an accountant, with a clever lawyer, you can take money out of our province and park it somewhere else. Let me give you a concrete example. The superstore down the street, owned by the Weston family, Loblaws empire. They are one of two families in this country that collectively have as much wealth as 11 million Canadians. That's how serious wealth inequality has become here. And Canada Revenue Agency currently has a lawsuit against Loblaws for $400 million that was taken out of Ontario and put into a tax haven in Barbados. Taken out. And while they cluck away at the club about their ill-gotten gains, there are seniors who can't get home care, who could injure themselves. There are people with abscesses in their teeth suffering, and enough is enough. We have to marshal the intelligent public service capacity to shut those loopholes down. They can't exist. We all have to contribute to our collective prosperity, and this Doug Ford kind of conservatism bears nothing in resemblance to the conservatism that I was raised in my household. Nothing at all.
Yes, hello. My name is Risa Upton, and the question I have is for Joel Harden. What I want to know is how much will $150 carbon tax per ton reduce carbon emissions in Ontario, and how will the tax be used? Also, how much will this cost per family per year on heating, gasoline, fuel, etc., etc., etc.?
Thanks for the question. First of all, our party is not running on a $150 carbon tax. And I'm disappointed, to be honest, in my conservative friends for the attack ad that was here yesterday. It was spurious. We are running on a carbon tax that is not far up with what the Liberals have proposed through a cap and trade initiative. It starts at roughly $26 a ton. I personally, what you're naming, when I sought the nomination, because I am an environmentalist, I ran in our nomination meeting on a platform of starting at $30 a ton and accelerating that $10 a ton with every particular year that passed until we got to the carbon neutral goal that Sherry talks about. And that plan has been sanctioned by the alternative federal budget, by most of the economists who take climate change seriously. And I'm disappointed, to be very honest, Colleen and other folks in the room from the Conservative Party, that my position when I ran for the nomination was represented incorrectly at the end point of the carbon tax and not what my party actually believes. I know if my friend Charlie Angus were here, I know that we have a conversation to make between energy workers and resource industries and environmentalists. If it becomes a matter of environmentalists like me in the downtown fighting with energy workers who need work, we are not going to stop the threat of climate change. But if we embrace the challenge of climate change, as other countries have done, where energy workers don't lose out, where the environmentalist community can contribute meaningfully, we have a huge opportunity in front of us. And I think our platform speaks to that.
In terms of, I'm not responsible, so I'm just. For climate change? Oh, for climate change. Okay. Sorry, thinking about, us and using energy and, other countries that we compete with economically, like China and India and the US, are runaway right now on energy, and we are 2% of that number. So there is a balance required in terms of fossil fuel and renewable, because if these countries have so much economic clout, then we are the ones that are paying for all this green energy, then we're the ones that are going to have trouble afterwards, and in terms of paying for all this, and the others are not respecting this and causing 98% of the climate change.
Oh, of course we do. So I'm going to be honest with you. I'm that kind of person that will tell you something you don't want to hear. The carbon tax, we need it, because the planet will die if we don't act on it. That's all right. We have different beliefs. I look at the 97% of science that shows that climate change will be the end of humanity. And by 2020, that is our turning point. 2 years from now, that will be our climate turning point, whether we will be living within 2 degrees of difference or living within 3 degrees of difference. And that will make the difference in humanity. And regarding carbon tax, the Green Party is not going to impose a carbon tax. The Green Party is actually imposing a carbon fee and dividend plan that's going to face the carbon cap and trade in 5 years. And the fee and dividend is going to be a revenue neutral plan, because we recognize that it's the people who suffer the most from climate change. And you're right. Every family who drives, who use gas, who use fossil fuels in their family, they're going to be impacted by this carbon tax. And we propose to use that revenue that we generate from the carbon fee, from the large corporations who pollute our climate and don't pay for it. And we put that money back in Ontario's pocket, because people who live in poverty needs that check to be able to alleviate from themselves, from that poverty. And people who have already that money, they can use that money to implement lower carbon technology.
Is it on? Yeah. There's been much public discussion surrounding the right to freedom of speech, as often pitted against the need to protect allegedly vulnerable groups or individuals from allegedly harmful or offensive speech, sometimes called hate speech. There's already been a question about protesting hot button issues in certain spaces. So maybe I'll refine my question to how this debate plays out on university campuses in particular, when certain controversial speakers are invited to speak and sometimes get shut down or deplatformed. I'm just wondering, my question to each of you is, what would your party do to provide for greater protection for free speech on university campuses and elsewhere, or alternatively to censor controversial speech? I'd like Joel and Colleen and Cherie, if there's time. Thank you.
Well, as a legal studies teacher, I'll tell you, there are limits to free speech. And the limit applies to this race, where all of the candidates here agree that Mr. Sears deserves no platform on the stage. People who spout hate and make people feel as if they're not safe in their communities should have no platform. And that's my position. There are reasonable limits on speech. We learned this over time in our history, around the world, in fact. You can't shout fire in crowded theater, particularly people who come at these debates from a standpoint of privilege. We have to make sure that everybody feels welcome in our community. And to be very honest, all of us here in this room, we can never be too smug. What happened in Charlottesville, West Virginia last summer, when a community bus organized, friends of mine, rabbis, imams, Reverend Bailey, whose church was defaced with anti-Black propaganda, we can't ever be too smug. There's a whiff of this now in the air, and we have to challenge it wherever it rears its head. My grandfather didn't fight as a war veteran against Nazism for nothing. That legacy has to stand for something. And I'm proud of what we have done as candidates to stand in solidarity to say Mr. Sears doesn't deserve a platform here. And I salute the organizers for not giving him one here.
I would only say that definitely our party is a very inclusive party in Toronto, and a very multi-ethnic, diverse community. It's we are inclusive. We respect diversity, and I'm gonna say not regarding on university property, but in terms of our leader, I felt he made a difficult decision with taking away the candidacy of one of the other persons who was running for leadership, Tanya Granick-Allen. She spoke out in a way that was disrespectful to some group, and he had the power, or he had the decency to say that's not respectful of others. So I think he was showing respect by saying we won't tolerate people being disrespectful to others, i.e. respect others, and freedom of speech is, you know, freedom of speech with respect, put it that way, not hate speech.
I'm going to use the little legal knowledge I have. On the first sentence, really, the first bit of the Charter of Rights and Freedom, everything in the Charter of Rights and Freedom is within reasonable limits. Yeah? If your speech and your action is creating a threat for another person's safety, for another person's feeling of inclusion, that's not freedom of speech. That's hate speech. I'm here as a woman of color, and I have to say, on this campaign trail, I have seen and endured racism, misogyny, sexism, homophobia, you name it, I've seen it, I've heard it, and I will not stand for it. Especially as someone who, probably the most recent graduate from a university. My university invited someone who is blatantly transphobic, and this person should not be ever given a platform to speak, because their intolerance is infringing on my freedom of existence. I'm not allowed to exist because of these people's freedom of speech. That's not freedom. That's just hate, and hate has no place in our society. And I agree with Joel. We always want to talk about how diverse and how inclusive we are, but we have to remember these people exist in our society, and we cannot let
Dr. Peter Stockdale, I suppose none of you would replace the Vatican, Canterbury Cathedral, the Wailing Wall, or the Kaaba with condos, yet as far as I'm aware, the candidates all support ZB and the Hydro Dam at Chaudière Falls. Aren't you just continuing the anti-Indian racism of the 19th century and carrying it into the 21st, like Donald Trump, but with a smiling green face? And I ask candidates Hardin, Yaknakvi, and Wong. I won't ask candidate McCleary, since she didn't even bother to acknowledge Algonquin territory.
Your question was that increasing the development on land in terms of the bridge. I'm sorry, I didn't. No, mine's working. I wasn't sure what the actual question was in terms of the Vatican, the Wailing Wall, and the Hydro Dam. So in terms of developing more land and taking away more land is what you're... Oh. Okay. I'm not sure exactly what this means, but I'm sorry. I don't know that part of history, or that whatever you're getting at, I'm not sure. So maybe I'll pass it.
Well, our party position, the Change for the Better program, doesn't mention the Chaudière Falls issue, but I, as an activist, have marched in support of the Free the Falls movement. I've met the Free the Falls movement. I've committed my support to the Free the Falls movement. I am very disappointed with former Minister John Baird's decision to unilaterally allow Zibi, now Dream, as I understand it, as the major fundraiser. And it's yet another example of what happens with developers in our city. That grandfather Commanda had this vision. William Commanda, if people aren't familiar with this huge and important figure in this territory's history, of a very different way we could treat that space as a sacred space where we could all learn about what the Algonquin peoples did when white people like me came here hundreds of years ago, and they taught us how to live here without furnaces and refrigerators and many of the other accoutrements we take for granted today. So I will support the Free the Falls movement. I oppose the Zibi development. I have done it in my capacity as an activist. But to be very clear for the audience here, it's not in the Change for the Better platform. The Change for the Better platform focuses on the issue of development more broadly and responsible development and making sure that local voices matter. But in this case, we're dealing with a treaty issue. And that takes on a different character for me. And I think we all have to do our job as treaty people to make sure justice is served. So I thank you for your question.
It is a very important question, and I have also taken the time in my capacity as the member of provincial parliament of meeting with Free the Falls, reviewing the documentation and sharing that with our federal member of parliament, given that that's where the decision making around this is. But also in my role as the Attorney General, I've been quite active in the negotiations that are taking place with the Algonquin people, because as we acknowledged earlier, this is unceded territory, and there is a very active land claim settlement negotiations that are going on, which Ontario is a very active participant. And as the Attorney General, of course, I worked along with the Minister for Indigenous Relations and Reconciliation to make sure that we are conducting those settlement negotiations in the most fairest manner to the Algonquin people, so that they do get access rightfully to the land that is belonged to them. And I'll continue that work if I have the privilege of getting reelected.
Apologizing. I'm not entirely sure of the development issue that you're speaking on, but what I will speak to is when we talk about reconciliation and when we talk about engaging Indigenous peoples in these important conversations, we have to ensure that they're the center of the conversation and that their voices are raised up. I find it absolutely disgusting that we still have the Indian Act, because that is just a colonial method that we have put in place to determine the treaty rights, and we need to repeal that, though that's a federal issue. I do want to say that in every decision making in Ontario, we have to center Indigenous voices. We're living on their land, we're living off their resources, and as a settler, and as a very, very fortunate settler who can come here for my freedom and rights being protected by the Canadian government, I cannot stand by injustices, especially when sacred land are being defaced. And that's just not happening in Ontario, it's happening across the country, and we have to do something about it. But I am not comfortable in leading this conversation because I am not an expert. We have to bring the voices back to grassroots Indigenous leaders and grassroots Indigenous communities. And that's where the conversation must start, and that's where the conversation must center.
Concerns proportional representation, which means representing in the House all votes cast, not just those of the winning party. Many other countries have implemented this very satisfactorily. What I'd like to ask Joel and Colleen, what will you do to implement proportional representation in Ontario?
Thanks for the question. I'm committed to proportional representation, and as is the Ontario NDP. Even if the people of Ontario elect an NDP government in a week's time by 37% of the vote, I am still in favor of proportional representation. Because all votes should matter. And to be honest, when I've been on the doorstep of conservative voters that have gnashed their teeth and said, you know, I'm probably going to vote for you because my vote doesn't count, or green voters, it bugs me because I know of other voting systems where those voices do matter in the Netherlands and other places like this. So what we committed to do, which is in our platform, is make sure that we don't study the issue to death, but make sure that the public knows what it's voting on. And that was the mistake we made in 2007. We approached the electorate with a different voting system. No one had a clue, aside from the experts, what they were voting on. And many decision makers took that to mean people don't want to talk about proportional representation. I'm proud to say I've done 3 canvasses with Réal Levesque, who's the president of Fair Vote Canada. We've been in rooming houses talking about proportional representation. We've been on lovely homes talking about it. Is a citizen issue. Everybody's vote should matter. Otherwise, the people who sacrifice so much to give us the democracy we have, we insult their legacy. So I thank you for your question.
I feel the same way. I feel that proportional representation is the most logical system. You just have to look across the border at the U.S. Electoral College system and see what happened in the last election as a result of someone winning a popular vote and someone else winning the Electoral College. So I agree. I think proportional representation makes much more sense, and I would support that change. I do support it. So yes, I would. I have other private members sort of bills that I would introduce before that one, but yes, I would support that. I do support that.
Oh, hello, my name is Renelle Chalifou. I want to ask a question related to equal pay for equal work and precarious workers. Now, I realize that you can't speak for all businesses in Ontario, but you can certainly speak to the 24 public colleges in Ontario that actually were on strike last year over 5 weeks. And we have the data that 70% of all faculty members are precarious workers, meaning that they could still be known as working full-time, yet they are not being paid equally as those 30% that are indeterminate and have benefits and have everything else. My question to you, I know where the Liberals stand on this, because as soon as it went on mediation, they basically forced the employees back to work without continuing negotiations of fair labor practices. So my question is,
just thinking about this for a second. Employment equity. Okay. First of all, I'm a woman who has 11 years of university education, and I expect that I am every bit as, competent as a man, and would expect equal pay for equal work. And I've, to be honest, never even considered my sex when I was looking for work. I graduated from university with an engineering degree, got 14 job offers, and thought, why am I getting so many offers? I knew it was because they were trying, and it was almost an insult to me that meritocracy is more important to me. So that's my personal belief. In terms of full-time versus part-time, our platform is really just about increasing jobs, about creating jobs. So yes, I know our economy is going to part-time because benefits cost so much. And I guess what I'm saying is we're trying to increase jobs, but in terms of full-time, part-time, I can't answer that because that's our society's trend. I mean, I've been a contractor as well. It's the extreme cost.
Well, thank you, and I firmly believe in equal pay for equal work. In fact, the Liberal government brought legislation, Bill 148, that deals with bringing rules around equal pay for equal work, dealing with part-time workers, seasonal workers, casual workers, making sure that all workers get paid the same thing. I also recognize that there's discrepancies within institutions like in the college system. And that is why we have started the process, a review process, to make sure to determine exactly to what extent the discrepancy exists, so that provincial government can pay accordingly to ensure that people do get paid the same as equal pay for the work they do. something that I fundamentally, as a value system, I personally believe in and will continue to advocate for.
Who recently graduated. Oh.
A recycled question, which I asked several years ago at a federal all candidates meeting. But first, before I do ask it, just to express my respect and thanks to all of you for seeking to represent us. It's not an easy job by any means. One of the reasons why it's not an easy job is because this is an issue-laden riding. The choices are hard, there are many. And you are all eloquent spokespeople for your own party platforms. But my question to you is, and I pose it to Yasser and to Joel, can you identify one aspect of your party's policy platform with which you disagree and why?
Okay. Well, I can be brief. I think it's out that I have a different opinion on what our school board should look like. And our school board at the elementary and secondary level. And I say that with all due respect to people of faith. I was raised as a person of faith, but I am one of the people in my party that has a different vision of how we should use our public resources and our public school system. And it's something I've spoken about with Muslim friends at the Ottawa Mosque, with the Jewish community, with my own family. But that is something where I am in a personal capacity, let me stress, not in alignment with where our provincial platform is. But that's just my personal opinion.
I think I'm going to point out to the question that was happening earlier around proportional representation. I think electoral reform, looking at how we can run our democracies, is an issue that I think my party can play an active role. As a major party, it's been fairly silent on it. We did do a referendum in 2007 election, but I'm perhaps, given my background, coming to Canada as an immigrant whose father spent 9 months as a political prisoner for leading a pro-democracy march, the issues around our democracy and voter participation or apathy that may exist are real issues. And I think when we see lower voter turnouts, it really worries me about our state of democracy, because fewer and fewer people are deciding to engage in that conversation. I think it's in the best interest of all political parties, especially major political parties, to do a better job in creating a more robust electoral system so that our democracy is stronger, even if that means weakening our capacity to form government. And that's something I feel very strongly and passionately about, that we need to do more. Looking at systems like proportional representation or mixed member proportional system, looking at things like mandatory voting like we have in Australia, so that we have a system that has everybody's voice included in it, in decision at the highest level that impacts all of our lives.
Resident of the riding, and my question concerns maintaining the integrity of the Catholic School Board in the province, including both funding and curriculum. My concern is to ensure a Catholic voice in the curriculum. And my question specifically is, where does your party stand, and where do the NDP and the Conservative Party stand on the issue of maintenance of the board? And would your government order a collapse into the public system? I direct my question to the NDP and the Conservative Party and personal, please.
Well, at the risk of repeating myself too much, the party has made its view clear in this election that it prefers a version of the status quo. And with all due respect to you, I don't. That's my personal opinion. And I think a democracy means something. And in a party, we can have collegial disagreements, but my leader, Andrea Horvath, is running on a platform called Change for the Better. And its vision for funding the system is to fix the school board, to fix the crumbling infrastructure of the school board, to scrap the EQAO testing format, which channels our kids and our teachers and handcuffs our learning capacities. And in doing so, will create a lot of opportunity, $40 million, in fact, to invest in mental health workers in every single high school in Ontario. That's why we've earned the endorsement of the Elementary Teachers Federation of Ontario, because we actually care about teachers. I am a teacher. I don't want to script teachers in doing their work. And it startles me when educators approach me personally and say, I can see the stifling of creativity from age 5 to age 11 in our school system, and this is terrible. But on the issue of funding for religious school boards in a personal capacity, that is my view, but I'm open to being persuaded. So you can come argue with me afterwards.
We also support the separate school board. We have no plans whatsoever to change that. It's enacted legislation that we would not touch. Since Joel started about education, I'll go there too. That's one of our highest priorities is education. We really feel that our standards have slipped in terms of testing, that our mathematics scores, half the students don't pass. We think we need to go back to more rigorous standards for mathematics. We need to set higher standards in order to compete with other countries. So yes to the separate school board, and also we have a strong focus. We want to revamp curriculums for English and history and math.
Well, my party's position is to keep the four boards as well, and our focus is to continue investing in education. We know in terms of our economic growth, that is the best investment we can make. We have come a long way in Ontario in terms of increasing our graduation rates from in 2003 around low 60s to high 80s and 90%. But we can keep doing better. We can keep strengthening our system. One of the areas that I am always keen about in making sure that our curriculum is up to date on a regular basis, with consultations with experts, not politicians writing the curriculum, but experts writing the curriculum, so that we are enabling and equipping our children with the best knowledge, with the best information, so that they have the choice to pursue their lives and be as successful as they can be, as many of us are here sitting in front of you.
I want to say I really respect your perspective, but there are many, many religions that exist in Canada, and they don't get their separate school board. And I'm going to talk sense. I'm going to talk about money. The Catholic school board gets way more funding than the public school board, and the public school board is falling apart. Is that fair? No. The Green Party stands strongly on merging the two school boards because we believe putting the resources together, we can actually build a better education system for everyone to thrive. And in that education system, absolutely we need to include religious studies, but we need to include a variation of different religious studies. So everyone in Canada, everyone in Ontario can get that religious study that some look for and some don't. But it is about what makes sense the most. If we have two different school boards, we're splitting the resources. If we merge it into one, there's more resources for everyone. And absolutely, we need to eliminate standardized testing, because who likes tests? But also, that's not skill by putting them through a stressful thing every other week.
My name's David Brosco. I have a local question, and I'd like to ask Joel and Yasser, please. The city has identified that there's a shortage of green space, especially in the western part of its riding. And the question, I'll expand upon it a little bit, but what would you do as an MPP to ensure that parkland and green space is maintained in the riding? And this is in the context of multi-jurisdictional green space in this riding, specifically the NCC and Rochester Field, for example. How would you see that the green space is maintained when the NCC is proposing mid to high-rise buildings in parkland?
This is a very important question you asking. It's a real concern in our growing community. I think from a provincial perspective, the role is around the provincial policy statement, the document that requires municipalities to develop their official plans with certain parameters, and protection of green spaces is a big part of it. Remember, I belong to a party that created the largest green belt that is bigger than PEI. To protect green spaces in Golden Horseshoe. So we are very, very mindful of it. The second part of it, I think, as a local MPP, is to work with your partners, is to work with community associations, is to work with all levels of government, especially at the municipal level, to make sure that those rules are being respected. I think, over the years, as you've seen, hopefully you will see have built a reputation of working with everyone to make sure the rules are being enforced, empowering communities so that you know exactly what your rights are, and ensuring that we're protecting our urban tree canopy, that we're protecting our waterways, that we're protecting our green spaces. But it's work that has to be done together, and I'm committed to continue to do that work with you.
Thank you for the question. I'll just try to be frank and say we have to deal with the issue of developer influence politics in the city. And the tools that we have are not doing that. And I'll name a specific example. You mentioned green space. I am very worried about the future of Tunney's pasture. And I've read the bequest of Mr. Tunney. And it's very clear that that space is meant to be for our collective welfare. But ringing around it are a lot of massive condo developments. And I am worried that that will encroach. And I'm also worried it will continue to encroach. Our official plan, effectively, if you listen to municipal councillors and many residents in this riding, matters for nothing. Thinking about the case of the Rosemont Library, for example. I mean, how in earth could we have a library with such limited capacity in a city with so much resources? And the Taggart family, who would do a lot of good charitable work in this town, have a building right beside it whose ground floor space could be perfectly usable for such an expanded library. I think that's where imaginative inclusionary zoning has to ask our friends in the developer community to cooperate with residents so essential public services like libraries are maintained and green spaces also are maintained. I'm very concerned at the rate at which mass condo developments and the canyonization of Westboro has allowed for the destruction of trees. And I will be an MPP that is willing to sit with you and to sit with the developer community and broker an actual
Hi, my name is Dale Brooks, and I recently moved to Ottawa, and I needed a family doctor here. Well, there was nobody I could find that was taking new patients, except one particular doctor. So I had really no choice. If I wanted a family doctor, I had to go to this person, which I did. Now, my first part is, what are you going to do about increasing the number of family doctors for our population? And B, I'm caught because if I don't like this family doctor, we don't like everybody, I can't switch to a new doctor because a doctor who's taking patients says that if you have a family doctor, you can't come and to have them. It's like a catch-22. So my question is,
Well, I mean, to directly answer the question on the issue of funding, because this is the matter. I mean, doctors in this province have worked for 7 years without a contract. I spoke to a general practitioner in the street today when I was canvassing in Westboro, and she confided how difficult it was to live without a contract, literally right out of medical school practicing up until now. So when you look at the Ottawa, sorry, Stuart, I won't steal all the thunder, but I've learned from the Ottawa Health Coalition, what they tell us is that given cutbacks that have been made over the course of 15 years, when our friends, the Liberals, have been in power, we have seen $300 million leave our community, which effectively amounts to a hospital being taken out of our community. And we have a premier at the moment, articulate, proud, but bragging about the fact that Ontario has the lowest per capita program spending in Canada. And I don't think that's anything to brag about, because what it means is that you don't get access to a family doc. You don't get access to the care that you need. So as someone married to a physician, as someone knowledgeable about the difficulties many family doctors have in maintaining a viable practice in the city, I want to make sure we sign a contract with doctors in this province. And I want to make sure resources flow such that we can have adequate family physicians. And we also have to look at the accreditation of internationally trained doctors on an adequate basis, because that is another way in which we can make sure people get the care they need.
Thank you for the question, and thanks for the opportunity to respond. Joel is right in what he says about the licensing doctors from outside the country, and there has been lack of education of doctors. There's been lack of funding for hospitals and for healthcare in general. Our approach is to support community primary care centers such as the Centertown Community Health Center, Sandy Hill, other things like that, where there are doctors available, there are nurses available, there's medical people available, so that you're not in that position where that you only have one doctor to choose from. The reason that there's a crisis in healthcare is thanks to the Drummond report. It was written by a banker on a request of the Liberal government. They brought in basically freezing for healthcare funding for the last 9 years. It's only recently, with the election coming up, that there's more money coming.
Great. Thank you very much for asking a very important question. Let me share an anecdote with you. When I was first elected 10 years ago to serve you, I could tell you that at my community office, looking for a family doctor was like the #1 call we used to get. That over the 10 years have become quite rare. Once in a while, we do get phone call once in a while, somebody looking for a family doctor, and we work hard, and we're actually successful in finding them a family doctor. It may not be right here in our community. It may be in one of the suburban communities like Barhaven, etc., where a lot of new practices are starting because of the population growth, and Ministry of Health encourages practices growing there as well. But you do get access to family doctor. But I'll tell you where my focus has been. Not to have people go to hospital. That's probably the most expensive way of providing healthcare, but it's to invest in community healthcare. We're really fortunate in Ottawa Centre to have 3 excellent community health centers: Centertown, Somerset West, and Carleton. That's where we need to continue making investment, which we have been, and I'm really proud to work with them. Increasing their capacity, making sure that you've got more multidisciplinary professionals who are practiced there, not just doctors, but nurse practitioners, registered nurse, dietitians, and nutritionists who can give you that very holistic care that you need and address the real issues that you may be facing. That's the direction. That is the future of healthcare, is community healthcare, because it's also based on prevention that keeps us healthy as opposed to.
This question is for Yasser, Colleen, and Joel. And so when I was 23, I took my first trip in Europe on a high-speed train, and it was amazing. And then I came home to a 401 system highway of getting around the city. And I felt like I've been living sort of in without for so long. And so now we're tantalizingly close to getting high-speed rail in this province. And so following the platforms, but I don't know whether or not the Conservatives, the NDP, are actually supportive of high-speed rail. I mean, I know the Liberals are, but can you tell me, not your personal opinions about whether or not you just generally like high-speed rail, is your party supportive of high-speed rail in Ontario?
answer is yes. As you know, the Liberal government is investing in a high-speed rail connecting Toronto to Windsor as a starting point, given the population growth that's taking place. A lot of people ask me, well, why not Ottawa to Toronto, which is a very good question. And the answer is that VIA is actually working on a high-frequency train connecting Ottawa to Toronto, and they've actually have received in the last federal budget planning dollars to put that in place. So given that VIA is already working on the Ottawa-Toronto corridor, the provincial government decided to first focus on for a high-speed train between Toronto and Windsor. That work is ongoing. The environmental assessment is ongoing. We're starting to buy tracks along the way. Track needs to build, and money has been allocated as well. I think it's exciting. I think it's high time, given our geography and diversity and the sparseness of population, that we connect our province with high-speed train.
So, I'm sorry. It's my understanding of our platform, and again, it's asking my brain to think of a different part of the province, which is hard because I've been so rooted in Ottawa Centre. My understanding is, rather like Yasser, we focused the Lightspeed Rail conversation in and around the GTA and how it accesses Windsor in London. But that is my understanding, given what, as Yasser mentioned, VIA has conducted between Ottawa and Toronto. But that is something we have committed to do in our platform. We do believe, again, though, and not a public-private partnership model for infrastructure projects. We believe that commits us to too much in expense in building these massive infrastructure projects, and we need to use the people's money wisely.
Our platform, I hope that you can hear me. We do support high-speed rail as my platform, or platform of my party, supports it predominantly to relieve the congestion in the GTA area. So we're looking at that as highly necessary in terms of the traffic and congestion. So yes, we do support high-speed rail.
I'm Ruth McFadden. How do you plan to deal with the need for more long-term care beds and more daily time spent with each resident in long-term care? Joel, Colleen? Yeah.
So in the platform, the Change for the Better platform, we've committed within the first 4 years of our government's mandate, if we have that opportunity to be the government in the province of Ontario, to introduce 15,000 long-term care beds. That's been our goal. We have an ultimate ambition to go to 40,000 if we're given the fortune to be reelected by the people of Ontario. We also believe in legislation that was before the House, before it was prorogued for this election, that would entitle each resident to 4 hours of contact care by staff. But I want to mention something too, because in as much as I'm absolutely committed to fight for our elders in this city and around the province, we cannot forget the working conditions of people who work in the elder care sector. And what I have seen in home after home that I visited is particularly personal care workers put in very difficult situations where they have 6 to 10 minutes to get a resident up and dressed and ready for breakfast. And that is not a winning situation. We need to make sure that regulations exist for the long-term care sector that respect residents and that respect workers in the long-term care sector. Our investments disproportionately will be in nonprofit care and municipal care. That's what we believe should be expanded. We are not big advocates of for-profit care. The wet law for inquiry is chilling. What we would like it to do is expand to the entire province, town by town, so we had a find and fix commission that could make sure that the terrible things that we've heard in the media happening in long-term care facilities never happen to any senior.
The Conservative Party has committed to 30,000 beds over 10 years, 15,000 over 5. The need for this is critical. We know that the waiting list is 2 to 3 years just to get into a long-term care facility. It's also very expensive to have people that belong in long-term care in hospital beds and taking resources away. So we also commit to the C-43 bill, which commits to 4 hours minimum, and we support that the average across the facility would support greater than 4 hours if the physician directs that the average comes out to higher than 4. In other words, it's 8 for one person, 5 for another, and 2, and take the average. We get more than the minimum of 4 hours, and we want to increase the number of personal support workers and the number of doctors in order to provide the service, or be a service provider for the elderly population.
So Liberal government has built about 10,000 new long-term care beds between 2004 and 2017. We are also committed to building 5,000 new long-term care beds over the next 5 years, and that work has started, focusing a lot on various diverse communities like Francophone speakers or other multilinguistic or different faiths community elders, and then additional 15,000 new long-term care beds in the following 5 years. So 30,000 in next 10 years. But I also want to stress that where we really need to also spend a lot of attention is home care. I talk to a lot of seniors. My dad is quite elderly now, and I often joked about the fact that anytime I will talk to him about long-term care, he'll kick me out of house and won't feed me lunch. Because he loves his house. He wants to live at home. He wants to live at as long as possible. What he wants is he needs support. And for that, we need to invest in personal support workers, qualified, regulated personal support workers. So those type of services are available, and perhaps help seniors in some of the daily chores they need. Like my father cannot shovel his snow anymore or cut his grass. If we can help them offset the cost, as the Liberal Party is proposing in our platform, you will just allow seniors to live that much longer and help them save some money as well. But that's where they'll get their most independence and care that they need is in their own home.
I have 2 young granddaughters, and I look at the future that I think awaits them. And I think it's a very different future than that which awaited me at that age. When I first voted in this province, the provincial debt was 0. The federal debt was 12.5 billion. Depending on whose numbers you look at, and with the hidden numbers that are tucked into hydro, provincial debt is now 400 billion, and the federal debt is about 800 billion. Hydro rates are high, businesses are leaving, they're non-competitive, and I see a real problem ahead in getting the funding from the private sector activity that will fund all of the public services that we need. I have a question for Joel and for Colleen, only those two, and I would like to ask what it is that you would do in your party to secure the future of our children, to deal with that burden of debt that is impinging on their ability to get secure jobs.
Thank you for the question. My Presbyterian grandmother thanks you from the grave. I also want to say, to add to the frightening statistics you mentioned, what people are carrying personally. Debt to income right now, according to the Bank of Canada, is 171%. To put that in perspective, the Greek economy crashed at 166%. The American economy crashed at 168% in 2008. We have gone from being one of the least indebted on a personal debt point of the G7 nations to being the most. So what that tells me is that for generations, we have not asked those who have the most in our society to pay adequate levels of tax on a personal level and on a corporate tax level. We've been on a trajectory downward because the ideology was, let's do this, it will create revenue. And when you look at what the Bank of Canada also reports, they note that on reports to shareholders, there is a $600 billion fiscal surplus collectively, with the most profitable companies in this country sitting as surplus on balance sheets. That money in tax cuts did not get reinvested in entrepreneurial activity. So my point to the corporate sector, to my own family, when we argue at Christmas, is it's time to start following a different model of development. Companies are successful in Europe. They're successful in Asia. They're successful in places in South America that have dramatically different.
My view and the view of the Ontario PC Party is we can't afford any more of these deficits. It's irresponsible, and we are the party that is trying to bring into line the spending as against the revenues that we have. With the GDP forecasted to drop to 2% and interest rates definitely on the rise, then all I can see is the debt increasing year by year as we pay higher. Already the debt interest is forecast to 17 billion. You add that with the deficit in terms of borrowing. I don't believe in borrowing our own money to pay for our services. We should be able to pay for our services. Otherwise, we're borrowing and paying interest on that money. It doesn't make sense. We can't keep growing our debt. We're already at, as you said, 350 billion. We need to pay that off so that years to come, your children aren't paying 50 billion a year in interest. And that is what happens when a country becomes bankrupt. It can't service its debt anymore. Nobody will lend the money. We're borrowing money to pay for services. It doesn't make sense. We can't afford to keep expanding services. That's my firm belief, and I stand by that, and I stand by Craig Oliver, the chief economist of Canada, who says there's 6 good reasons why.
Well, I mean, I think the question is bigger than Ontario. I think this is a fundamental question, and one of the biggest challenges we have is we are a large country with a very small population base. I mean, that's a reality, and we have worked hard to build a very high quality standard of living. But imagine getting services far north of this province. Imagine getting electricity to remote areas. That costs extraordinary amount of money. We so often compare ourselves to Europe. Well, European countries are extremely small, and their population are densely populated. The provision of services is that much more cheaper than it is in Canada. And that has posed a serious challenge for governments over time when people demand and rightfully deserve high quality public services, that you have to find a way, the balanced way of providing those. And part of that balanced way is leveraging your economy and borrowing certain amount of money. When I go to door and talk to people every weekend, I don't get to hear from people saying, don't give me more services. Don't give me this public service or that. In fact, people ask for more and more. And they also say, and cut my taxes, right? So it's got to come from somewhere. So this is where I agree with Joe. We got to be frank in our conversation.
Each of the candidates now is going to read their final 1 minute summation burp, basically. And you all know who's first, second, third. I believe Colleen is first this time. Second is Joel. Sherry, you're third. Stuart, you're fourth. And Yastanakti is fifth. And you may applaud. Go ahead.
Thank you for your attention tonight and coming out to learn more about the candidates. My cry is for that the debt not continue to grow, that we start to manage our finances responsibly, that we do not continue to run deficits, that we invest in things that will help our economy grow, help our children get good jobs in the future, that we manage hydro rates more responsibly, get those down to help businesses and taxpayers. We bring back jobs and trust in government. I cannot stress enough how strongly I feel about our province going down the drain into a financial mess. It's really, it's reckless. And I think we need to focus on not expanding services, but trimming
And Joel.
Well, I would like to end by thanking the community associations for this debate. It was great to have so many questions from the floor. This is one of the first times we've had that. And I want to end by trying to introduce myself because my team back there and folks who've worked with me know I'm not a great self-promoter. It's not what I do. I'm not super interested in getting into the newspaper. What I've been my entire life since I've been a cynic to optimist convert, that's thanks to Jack and Olivia, is working with people at a grassroots level to get change done. The one thing I'll name here as I end is the work we did over 3 years to expand the Canada Pension Plan. We had 52 town halls from across the country where people spoke to their retirement anxiety, and under the era of the Harper government, which was not easy, we moved the conversation forward, and one of the first things a Liberal government in Canada did was follow through on that. We need to bring a town hall model of engaged democracy to this riding and every single riding in this province. That's something I can help you do. We need to make sure we demand more from our politics, and I want to work with you to do that. Thanks.
I too want to thank all the organizers and all of you for staying to the end, because I don't know about you, I'm boiling over here. We're all here, us and you, because we want change. Every 4 years, we look at the ballot and we decide who's going to decide our future. So I ask you to break the status quo politics, because we've voted, well, not the Communist Party, but we voted many of these parties in government. And some were longer than others. But we need to move forward with our politics and not just get sweet, sweet promises every 4 years. I love the sweet promises, but they just have to happen. I am offering a fresh perspective. I am here to represent your values and not my party's values, and that makes me so different from everyone here, because the Green Party is the only party that doesn't whip votes. And I want to thank you, all of you, for coming again and vote.
Sherry, though we haven't been elected as the government in Ontario, we have elected MPs and MPPs here, and they ran on a people's agenda to put people before corporate profit, and that's still our position, and we will present it as well. I want to speak on two issues which came up in the debate that then I didn't get asked questions about. One was Indigenous rights, about the Zibi thing on Chaudière Falls. We believe in recognition of a nation-to-nation development. That's an example where divide and conquer allowed the Liberal government to put that in. The other one I want to speak about is mixed member proportional representation. That was voted down, but that was not a fair thing. That we stand fully for that.
Well, thank you, first of all, for all being here. I'm absolutely envious of those who are standing outside and listening to this. You can hear them. The breeze is good. Thank you for the privilege you have given me to serve as your local MPP. You've gotten to know me well. I'm not a protester. I'm not an agitator, but I have the capacity to learn issues, to work with the community, and come up with pragmatic solutions. And my commitment to you, that if I have the privilege of being reelected, that I will continue to keep working hard for you and to ensure that we're focused on local solutions and take our voice at the provincial level. So on June 7th, I hope I can earn your vote to represent you again as your member of provincial parliament from Ottawa Centre. Thank you.
Thank you, Amanda. So,